The hum of the Odyssey's thrusters was a familiar lullaby to Captain Iris Thorne, but as the research vessel nudged into orbit above Zelos Prime, a new, unfamiliar tension filled the bridge. Years of theoretical calculations of probes sent into the void had led them to this moment. First contact with the Xylosian Collective. Thorne, a man whose life had been dedicated to the quiet pursuit of astronomical truths, felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He'd meticulously reviewed every conceivable scenario for this encounter. A tense standoff, perhaps a battle of wits. Across the vastness of space, or a cautious exchange of complex diplomatic gestures, each side probing for weakness or advantage. He'd even mentally rehearsed a brief, intense skirmish, the Odyssey's defensive systems primed, ready to flee if necessary. Yet, as the Xylosian queen, Lyraza, descended from her gleaming chrome vessel, a ship that seemed to drink in the distant starlight, the reality unfolding before him defied all preparation. The landing bay of the Odyssey was a sterile expanse of reinforced alloy, designed for cargo and maintenance, not for an audience with an alien monarch. Thorne stood at its center, flanked by his seasoned security detail, their energy rifles. Held loosely but ready, a subtle hum of readiness emanating from their weapons. The Xylosian ship, sleek and impossibly elegant, had docked with a whisper of displaced air, its primary ramp extending with a silent grace. Thorne watched, his breath held tight in his chest, as the first of the Xylosian delegation emerged. Tall, slender beings with chitinous exoskeletons that shimmered with iridescence, their multifaceted eyes observing their surroundings with an almost unsettling stillness. Then she appeared, Lyraza. She was taller than the others, her form cloaked in robes that seemed woven from spun starlight, moving with a fluid dignity that captivated the eye. Her arrival was less an entrance and more an unfolding, each step deliberate, regal. Thorne felt a wave of anticipation, mingled with a professional anxiety, wash over him. This was it, the moment of truth. He prepared to offer the standard human greeting, a carefully worded statement of peace and intent, translated into Xylosian by the Odyssey's advanced xenolinguistic AI. He opened his mouth, the words forming on his tongue, but before he could utter a single syllable, before his crew could even shift their weight, before any threatening move could be conceived or even imagined, Lyraza's multifaceted eyes met his. And then she knelt. It wasn't a stumble or a fall or a moment of weakness. It was a deliberate, profound drop to one knee, her shimmering robes fanning out around her like an exotic bloom on the cold metal floor. The air in the landing bay, a carefully recycled mix of Earth-standard nitrogen and trace elements, seemed to thicken, crackling with an unspoken, electrifying tension. Thorne's carefully constructed diplomatic composure shattered. He stared utterly bewildered, his mouth hanging slightly open. His security detail, hardened veterans who had faced down asteroid pirates and dealt with volatile mining consortiums, froze, their rifles still humming, but their faces a mask of stunned confusion. The Xylosian delegation behind their queen remained equally motionless, their intricate mandibles clacking softly, a sound that seemed to be an involuntary expression of their own astonishment, a low, collective murmur of disbelief echoing through the otherwise silent bay. Thorne's mind raced, desperate for an explanation, any explanation. Was it a cultural greeting he had overlooked in the vast Xylogen cultural databases? A sign of respect so profound it bordered on subservience? But why? He had done nothing. He hadn't spoken. He hadn't made a gesture. He was simply there, standing, a human in a standard UEF uniform, his face probably a picture of polite apprehension. Nothing he could recall from the extensive briefings suggested such an act from a leader of a known galactic power. The Xylosian Collective was ancient, their technology advanced beyond humanity's wildest dreams, their influence spanning dozens of star systems. They were conquerors, explorers, builders of impossibly grand structures, not beings who knelt before strangers. Thorn felt a prickle of unease crawl up his spine. This wasn't just unexpected. It was deeply, fundamentally unsettling. It felt wrong, like a piece of a puzzle forced into the wrong slot, distorting the entire image. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The silence in the landing bay became heavy, almost suffocating. The hum of the Odyssey's systems, usually a comforting backdrop, now seemed loud and intrusive, a testament to the unreality of the moment. Thorn finally found his voice, a strained whisper that felt ridiculously inadequate. "Queen Lyraza," he managed, the title feeling foreign and overly formal in the context of her prostrate position. "Please, rise." His voice echoed slightly in the vast space. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Lyraza stirred. Her head, with its complex array of sensory organs, lifted slightly, her multifaceted eyes, a shifting kaleidoscope of blues and greens, locking on to his once more. There was an intensity in their gaze, a depth that seemed to bypass his physical form and probe directly into his very core. It was a look that contained a strange mixture of reverence, sorrow, and something akin to profound ancient recognition. She didn't just meet his eyes. She seemed to drink him in, to analyze him on a level far beyond the visible spectrum. The moment stretched, and then, with a fluid grace that defied her earlier, sudden drop, she began to rise. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, as if each fiber of her being acknowledged the significance of the act. As she stood to her full height, towering over Thorn by at least a head, her gaze remained fixed on him, unwavering, almost unnervingly so. Her Xylogen delegation, still rooted to their spots, began to shift, a faint, almost imperceptible rustling of their chitinous forms. Lyraza finally spoke, her voice a series of complex clicks and whistles, translated instantly by Thorn's cum badge. "Harbinger," the AI translated, its synthesized voice devoid of emotion, the one awaited. Thorn blinked. I don't understand," he replied, his own words feeling clumsy and inadequate. "What do you mean?" Lyraza offered no further explanation. Her gaze intensified, and a ripple like a wave passing through water seemed to pass over her shimmering robes. She simply held his gaze, a silent oracle, her eyes holding secrets that Thorn couldn't begin to fathom. The air remained charged, thick with the unspoken question that throbbed in Thorn's mind. Why? And more unsettling still, a creeping suspicion began to form, a chilling realization that whatever had just happened, whatever ancient prophecy or cosmic alignment Lyraza believed him to be, it had irrevocably changed the nature of this first contact, twisting it into something far more profound and far more terrifying than he could have ever imagined. The encounter had just begun, and already Thorne felt as though he was standing on the precipice of a galactic mystery, a mystery that began with an alien queen kneeling before him for no discernible reason, and the heavy weight of an unknown destiny pressing down on his shoulders. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that his life, and perhaps humanity's place in the galaxy, would never be the same. The silence, filled only by the Odyssey's steady hum and the distant, confused clacking of xylogene mandibles, felt like the calm before a cosmic storm. Captain Aris Thorne, still reeling from the inexplicable genuflection of Queen Lyraza, finally managed to regain some semblance of composure, albeit a fragile one. The Xylogen Queen had risen slowly, with an almost agonizing grace, her multifaceted eyes still fixed on him, a gaze that felt less like observation and more like a profound, unsettling evaluation. The immediate threat, or rather the expected threat, had vanished, replaced by a bewildering mystery. Thorne had stammered out a request for her to rise, and she had complied, her movements echoing the profound deference she had shown moments before. As the Odyssey's xenolinguist, Dr. Lena Petrova, a woman whose calm demeanor usually matched the sterile precision of her scientific instruments, began to initiate formal diplomatic protocols, Thorne found himself profoundly off balance. Lyraza, though now standing, maintained an unnerving proximity, her eyes never truly leaving his, even as she engaged in what passed for conversation with Dr. Petrova. Her responses, translated by the ship's advanced AI, were always directed subtly back towards Thorne, their true meaning shrouded in enigma. The diplomatic efforts that followed were unlike anything Thorne had ever encountered. The Xylogians, a race renowned for their rigid adherence to protocol and their formidable intelligence, were uncharacteristically pliable. They agreed to every human request, offering unprecedented access to their archives, their technological marvels, and even their sacred sites, all without demanding reciprocal access to human data or even a single concession. Thorne, a man whose life was built on logical deductions and observable phenomena, found himself navigating a landscape devoid of familiar landmarks. Lyraza herself, during these initial formal exchanges, continued her unsettling pronouncements. She spoke of Thorne as the harbinger, the one awaited, and the echo of the great silence. Each phrase, translated with unsettling accuracy by the AI, sent a fresh shiver down Thorne's spine. When he or Dr. Petrova pressed for clarification, asking for specific details about these prophecies or the great silence, Lyraza would merely turn her multifaceted gaze upon Thorne, a deep, almost mournful sadness filling their depths. Her answers would become even more cryptic, dissolving into abstract concepts of cosmic tides and forgotten stars, leaving the human delegation baffled and increasingly unnerved. The Xylogian people, from the lowest drone to the highest-ranking advisors, mirrored their queen's strange deference. They moved with a quiet efficiency, their actions demonstrating an unwavering respect that bordered on reverence for Thorne. Doors that would normally be sealed to outsiders swung open effortlessly. Complex Xylogian data networks, normally protected by layers of alien encryption, were made freely accessible. It was as if humanity, and specifically Thorne, had stumbled upon a forgotten key to their deepest secrets. This unearned trust, this complete lack of suspicion, created an unsettling undercurrent beneath the surface of the seemingly successful first contact. Thorne felt less like a respected diplomat and more like an unwitting participant in a grand, ancient ritual. He was being treated not as an equal, but as something far more significant, something he vehemently denied being. The unease grew into a persistent hum in his mind, a dissonant note in the supposed harmony of their encounter. He found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, expecting a catch, a hidden price, a sudden revelation that would explain this bizarre behavior and shatter the illusion of goodwill. One afternoon, as Thorne was being guided through a sprawling Xylosian botanical garden, a place of alien flora that pulsed with bioluminescence and hummed with unheard frequencies, La Raza approached him, alone. Her retinue had uncharacteristically kept their distance. The air was thick with the scent of exotic blossoms, a perfume that was both beautiful and strangely melancholic. She didn't speak immediately, but simply observed him, her multifaceted eyes tracking his every subtle movement. "The stars speak to you," she eventually stated, her voice a low series of clicks and hums that sounded almost mournful, even through the AI's translation. Thorne shook his head. "I'm an astrophysicist, Lyraza. I study the stars. They don't speak to me in any literal sense." A faint, almost imperceptible tremor passed through her form. "You do not remember," she whispered, her voice filled with and profound sadness, "but the echoes are strong within you." Her words sent a shiver down Thorne's spine. Remember what? He wanted to ask, but the question felt pointless. Her answers were always evasive, always drawing him back to vague prophecies, and an unsettling sense of an unburdened past dot as the days turned into weeks. The Odyssey crew became increasingly immersed in Xylosian culture and technology. Dr. Petrova and her team worked tirelessly, attempting to decipher the reams of data they were being given. They found technological advancements that baffled them, energy sources that defied known physics, and historical records spanning millennia. Yet for all the knowledge bestowed upon them, the central mystery remained. Why the unwavering deference? Why the inexplicable kneeling? And why Lyraza's mournful gaze always fixed on Thorne, as if he carried a profound secret, a cosmic burden she could only dimly perceive? Thorne often found Lyraza observing him from afar, a silent sentinel, her presence a constant reminder of the strange, unasked question that hung heavy in the air between them. He felt like a specimen under a microscope, or perhaps a fragile, unwitting vessel for something ancient and vast. The Xylosians, he observed, were a people steeped in tradition, their every action seemingly dictated by millennia of established customs. Their sudden, complete deviation from this rigid structure solely for him was a stark anomaly that screamed of a deeper, hidden significance. The weight of this unexplained reverence began to press down on Thorne, transforming his scientific curiosity into annoying anxiety. He would wake in the middle of the night, haunted by Lyraza's mournful eyes, by the chilling phrase, the one awaited. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was playing a role in a play he hadn't read the script for, a cosmic drama whose opening scene had been completely nonsensical. His logical mind screamed for answers, for quantifiable data, for a rational explanation. Yet the Xylosians offered only cryptic pronouncements and unwavering, almost heartbreaking deference. Their unwavering belief in his unknown significance was a silent oracle, constantly speaking of a destiny he did not understand, a burden he did not ask for. The irony was not lost on him. He, a man who sought to unravel the universe's mysteries through observation and reason, was now caught in the center of an enigma that seemed to defy all logic, driven by the profound, unspoken conviction of an alien queen whose first act had been to kneel before him, and whose reasons for doing so remained agonizingly, terrifyingly unknown. He was walking a tightrope between scientific discovery and bewildering prophecy, and the ground beneath him felt increasingly unstable. Every gesture of Xylosian kindness, every shared piece of their advanced knowledge, felt like another thread in an intricate, unseen web, drawing him deeper into a cosmic secret that he feared. He was not prepared to confront. The silence of Lyraza S. Oracle, devoid of clear answers, was far more deafening than any shout. Captain Harris Thorne, despite the Xylosian's continued hospitality and unparalleled openness, found himself trapped in a gilded cage of incomprehension. The initial shock of Queen Lyraza's genuflection had morphed into a persistent, knowing anxiety. Every offer of access, every piece of Xylosian technology freely shared, felt less like a gift and more like a binding, invisible chain. Dr. Petrova and her team continued to process the immense influx of data, their excitement palpable. Yet Thorne couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing the crucial piece of the puzzle. The why behind all this he spent his days in a cycle of formal meetings and guided tours, each one reinforcing the strange reverence the Xylosians held for him, a reverence he still couldn't explain or accept. Lyraza's enigmatic pronouncements echoed in his mind. The harbinger, the one awaited, the echo of the great silence. They were beautiful, poetic phrases, but to a man of science they were maddeningly vague, whispers of a destiny he did not want. One evening, after a particularly bewildering diplomatic dinner, where Lyraza had spoken at length about cosmic tides and harmonious alignments while looking directly at him, Thorne retreated to his personal quarters on the Odyssey. The sterile lines of the human ship were a stark contrast to the organic, flowing architecture of the Xylosian structures, and for the first time in weeks he felt a sense of uneasy normalcy. He poured himself a nutrient paste, the bland taste a familiar comfort, and tried to make sense of the day's events. He reviewed the Xylosian historical archives, translated painstakingly by Dr. Petrova's team. They were filled with accounts of a civilization spanning millennia, of triumphs and tragedies, of technological marvels and deep philosophical musings. But nestled within these vast records were recurring fragments, tales of an ancient cataclysm, an event simply referred to as the Great Silence. These accounts were sparse, often cryptic, like fractured pieces of a long-forgotten nightmare. They spoke of entire star systems falling dark, of civilizations vanishing without a trace, of a profound cosmic quiet that stretched across the galaxy. It wasn't a war or a plague or a natural disaster. It was simply silence, a void where there had once been life. The Xylosians themselves, the texts suggested, had barely survived, hiding in deep space sanctuaries until the silence receded. And then there was the prophecy. This was even more fragmented, often appearing as poetic verses or ritualistic chants. It spoke of a speaker of the void, a being who would emerge from the silence and either bring about ultimate salvation or herald final doom. This speaker was said to possess an innate connection to the fabric of reality itself. Thorn scoffed internally. Superstition. Ancient fears dressed up in cosmic language. He was a pragmatic astrophysicist, not a figure in some alien myth. Yet the unsettling coincidences continued to pile up. The next morning, Lyraze invited Thorn to visit one of their most sacred sites, a celestial observatory unlike anything humanity had ever conceived. It was not a conventional telescope, but a massive, sprawling complex carved into the living rock of Xylos Prime, powered by an energy source that pulsed with an ethereal, unknown light. The Xylosians believed it could listen to the whispers of the universe. Thorn was intrigued, his scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming his growing dread. As he entered the central chamber, a vast, echoing space with a shimmering, almost liquid-like floor that reflected the simulated cosmos above, he felt a strange resonance, a faint vibration that seemed to hum in his bones. Lyraze stood nearby, observing him with her usual intense gaze. She gestured towards a complex control panel, an intricate array of crystalline interfaces that pulsed with soft light. Only the pure of heart may touch these controls, she stated, her voice resonating slightly in the vast chamber. Thorn, despite the dramatic pronouncement, approached the panel with the detached curiosity of a scientist. He saw no obvious danger, no signs of booby traps or psychic probes. He simply reached out, his fingers brushing against a smooth, cool, crystalline surface. The moment his skin made contact, a blinding flash of light erupted from the panel, momentarily washing out the simulated cosmos on the floor. A low, resonant hum filled the chamber, growing in intensity, vibrating through the very stone. The shimmering floor, which had displayed generic star fields, now shifted, focusing on a specific cluster of stars, a nebula, a distant galaxy. Thorn's breath caught in his throat. These weren't random images. They were precise, detailed celestial events, movements of stars and gas clouds that were entirely unknown to human astronomical records. He recognized the patterns, the unique stellar drift, the subtle shifts in cosmic dust. They matched, with chilling accuracy, the fragmented Xylosian prophecies of cosmic alignments, events that were supposedly only observable by the speaker of the void. A gasp tore from Lyraze's multifaceted throat. She staggered back a step, her shimmering robes rustling. Her usually stoic expression was replaced by one of profound awe, mingled with a visible tremor of trepidation. "The void speaks through him," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a profound realization etched onto her alien features. Her Xylosian attendants, who had been maintaining their respectful distance, now rushed forward, their mandibles clacking furiously, a chorus of astonished murmurs. Thorn, still mesmerized by the celestial display unfolding before him, felt a cold dread begin to seep into his very bones. It wasn't superstition, it wasn't chance. The observatory had reacted to him, and it was showing him things no human eye had ever seen. Things that somehow connected directly to these ancient, terrifying prophecies. He pulled his hand away from the panel, and the display on the floor flickered, then returned to its default generic star field. The hum subsided. The silence that followed was even more profound than before, broken only by the rapid, excited clacking of the Xylosians. Thorn looked at Lyra, his mind racing. Her eyes, filled with a terrifying mix of reverence and fear, confirmed his dawning realization. This wasn't a coincidence. He had just activated an ancient alien device, a device that seemed to acknowledge him as the fabled speaker. The implications were staggering, terrifying. He wasn't just a visiting diplomat, he was in their eyes a cosmic entity, a figure of prophecy. The kneeling, the deference, the vague pronouncements, it all suddenly gained a chilling, if still incomprehensible, context. He was trapped in a narrative not of his own making, a story whispered through millennia of alien history, a story that now seemed to be reaching its terrifying climax with him at its center. The Great Silence was not just a myth. It was a looming threat, and the Xylosians clearly believed he was the key, for better or worse, to their survival. He was no longer just a captain. He was a pawn, or perhaps a living prophecy, in a cosmic game he barely understood, and the whispers of the past had just become deafening. The aftershocks of the celestial observatory incident rippled through Captain Aris Thorn's very being, not as physical tremors, but as a deep, unsettling vibration in his soul. The blinding flash of light, the resonant hum, and most chillingly, the precise, unbidden display of cosmic events unknown to human science, had shattered his carefully constructed wall of skepticism. Lyra's horrified gasp and her whispered words, "The void speaks through him," echoed in his mind, stripping away any last vestige of rational doubt. He had activated an ancient alien device, a device that seemed to recognize him as the fabled speaker of the void, a figure of prophecy. From their deepest, most terrifying myths, the Xylosian attendants, usually so composed, had burst into a frenzy of excited, anxious clicks and gestures, their belief in his prophetic significance now cemented, unwavering and absolute. Thorn felt a cold dread settle in his stomach, a heavy, suffocating weight. He was no longer just a visiting diplomat. He was, in their eyes, a cosmic entity, a pawn in a game far older and grander than humanity could comprehend. From that moment forward, the Xylosian deference intensified to an almost unbearable degree. Wherever Thorn walked, a silent space was created around him, a respectful cordon. The Xylosian officials, who had once treated him with polite formality, now approached him with a mixture of awe and profound, almost mournful reverence. Their movements became even more subdued in his presence, their voices lowered to hushed tones, as if fearing to disturb a sacred aura. This heightened veneration, rather than comforting Thorn, only amplified his discomfort. He felt less like a respected guest and more like a fragile, unwitting vessel for something ancient and vast. His security detail, always vigilant, now seemed to shrink back slightly, unsure how to act in the face of such alien piety. Dr. Petrova, ever the scientist, attempted to interview Lyra more extensively about the observatory's activation, but the Queen's answers, filtered through the Odyssey's xenolinguistic AI, continued to be riddled with poetic metaphors and mystical allusions, always circling back to Thorn's unique connection to the void. She spoke of him as the focal point, the nexus of the ancient and the new, phrases that only deepened the terrifying mystery. Thorn tried, desperately, to counter their belief with logic. During a private meeting with Lyraza in a chamber filled with softly glowing Xylosian artifacts, he attempted to explain the scientific principles of chance, of coincidental alignment of human biases in pattern recognition. Lyraza, he began, his voice calm, rational. What happened in the observatory was likely a unique electromagnetic resonance, perhaps triggered by my specific biosignatures, which then interacted with the ancient technology in an unforeseen way. It's science, not prophecy. Lyraza listened patiently, her multifaceted eyes fixed on him, reflecting the soft glow of the artifacts. When he finished, she tilted her head slightly, a gesture that conveyed both understanding and unwavering conviction. You speak of the mechanics, her voice hummed through the translator, the how. We speak of the truth, the why. The void has spoken, through you. Her refusal to accept his scientific explanation, her unwavering faith in his destiny, was both frustrating and deeply unsettling. It was clear that her belief was not based on observable evidence in the human sense, but on something far deeper woven into the very fabric of Xylosian existence. The burden of their expectations began to weigh heavily on Thorn. He was a scientist, not a messiah. He felt like a fraud, an accidental imposter in a cosmic drama he didn't understand. The serene beauty of Xylos Prime, with its vibrant alien flora and its humming, intricate cities, now felt oppressive. The atmosphere thick with unspoken prophecies and ancient fears. He started to have trouble sleeping, his mind replaying the moment in the observatory, the Raja-esque gaze, and the chilling words the one awaited. He knew he couldn't simply dismiss their beliefs. The Xylosians were too advanced, too deeply convinced. The truth, however bizarre, had to lie somewhere within their ancient knowledge. He felt an intense, desperate need to understand why they believed this, what they truly feared, and what role they expected him to play. This knowing uncertainty aided him, transforming his scientific curiosity into a desperate, almost frantic search for answers. One evening, Lyraza summoned Thorn to a secluded, dimly lit chamber deep within the Xylosian capital. The room was sparse, almost austere, save for a single large plinth at its center, upon which rested a shimmering, unidentifiable object covered by a dark cloth. The air here was heavy, still, almost devoid of the usual faint hum of Xylosian technology. Thorn felt a prickle of unease. This was different. This was not a formal diplomatic meeting. This felt personal, urgent. Lyraza, her form seeming more ethereal in the subdued lighting, approached him directly, her usual deferential distance gone. Her multifaceted eyes were no longer filled with just reverence, but with a profound, raw fear, a fear that somehow pierced through the alien facade and resonated with something primal within Thorn. "Captain Thorn," she began, her voice a low, resonant series of clicks. "The truth is heavier than you know. The great silence, it is not merely a memory. It is a cosmic entity, an ancient, malevolent force." She paused, her many eyes focusing intensely on Thorn's face, as if gauging his reaction, preparing him for the immense weight of her revelation. "We call it the Oblivion Cord." The translated words hung in the air, heavy and dark. "It is not a being of flesh and blood, or even energy, as you understand it. It is a disharmonious frequency, a cosmic resonance that periodically sweeps through the galaxy, shattering all life it touches. It is the ultimate anti-existence, a note that unmakes reality. We, the Xylosians, have witnessed its passage before. Entire star systems teeming with life reduced to silent, lifeless husks. Our ancestors survived only by severing their connection to the galactic network, by hiding in the deepest, most shielded pockets of space, waiting for its destructive wave to pass. Her words painted a terrifying picture, a force so vast and insidious it defied comprehension. This wasn't a localized threat. It was an existential horror on a galactic scale. The Great Silence was an active, malevolent force, not just a historical event. Lyra's voice dropped to a near whisper, a sound of profound despair. And now the Oblivion chord is stirring once more. We feel its distant rumble, a growing disharmony in the cosmic symphony. Our sensors, our ancient prophecies, they all confirm it. It is coming. Thorn felt a sudden, cold sweat break out. On his forehead, this was it. The reason for their bizarre behavior, for their desperate deference. They weren't worshipping him. They were terrified, and they saw him as their only hope. But why me? Thorn managed to ask, his voice hoarse. What can I do against a cosmic force? Lyraza moved towards the plinth, her movements slow, deliberate. With a dramatic flourish, she drew back the dark cloth, revealing the object beneath. It was an ancient, intricately carved Xylosian artifact, pulsing with a faint, unknown energy. It was not metallic nor crystalline, but something in between, alive with a soft inner luminescence that cast dancing shadows across the chamber. It was beautiful, yet profoundly alien, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to writhe and shift. This, Lyraza stated, her voice heavy with a mix of hope and despair, is the key. It is not a weapon in the conventional sense. It is an instrument, an amplifier. Our ancestors, in the moments of the last great silence, forged this from the echoes of the chord itself, a desperate attempt to find a counter-frequency. But it remained inert, silent. It requires the touch of the speaker. It requires the unique resonance that you, Captain Thorn, possess. Only the speaker can awaken it. Only by awakening the key can we hope to silence the chord. Thorn stared at the artifact, then back at Lyraza. The weight of her words, the crushing reality of the Oblivion chord, and the terrifying responsibility now thrust upon him, threatened to overwhelm him. He was a scientist, not a chosen one. He was meant to observe, to analyze, to understand, not to wield ancient alien instruments against cosmic horrors. Yet the fear in Lyraza's eyes, the sheer, undeniable terror of an entire civilization, was palpable. He couldn't dismiss it as superstition any longer. The celestial observatory had proven that much. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and touched the artifact. It felt warm, almost alive against his fingertips. A faint, almost imperceptible hum resonated through it, a low thrum that seemed to align with the subtle vibration he had felt in the observatory. It was a shared burden, he realized with a sickening lurch of understanding. Not just his, but humanity's. They had stumbled into a cosmic struggle, an ancient war against anti-existence, and for some inexplicable reason, he and by extension his species held a unique, pivotal role. The key felt heavy in his hand, not just in its physical mass, but with the immense, unimaginable task it represented: to silence a cosmic entity, to protect not just the Xylosians, but perhaps countless other civilizations across the galaxy. The thought was staggering, impossible. Yet Lyra's eyes, still fixed on his, were filled with a desperate, unwavering hope. He was the harbinger, the one awaited, the speaker of the void, and the time had come for him to attempt to awaken. The key to play his part in this terrifying cosmic symphony, whether he understood it or not. The fate of potentially billions, perhaps trillions, now rested squarely on his shoulders, bound by a mysterious alien prophecy and a strangely resonant artifact. Captain Iris Thorne stood in the stark, dimly lit chamber, the ancient Xyloan artifact heavy and strangely warm in his grasp. Its faint inner luminescence pulsed rhythmically, a silent heartbeat against his palm. Lyra's words, heavy with the weight of cosmic terror and desperate hope, resonated in his mind. Only the speaker can awaken it. It is the only way to silence the chord. Thorne, the pragmatic astrophysicist, wanted to scoff, to dissect the artifact with a spectrometer and dismiss it as an elaborate mystical contraption. But the memory of the celestial observatory, of the precise, undeniable patterns it had revealed, extinguished that impulse. He was no longer just a scientist observing. He was an unwilling participant in an ancient, unfolding drama. The fear in Lyra's multifaceted eyes was real, and the threat of the Oblivion Chord, a malevolent, life-shattering frequency, was terrifyingly tangible. He felt a profound, almost dizzying sense of responsibility settling upon his shoulders, a shared burden that felt heavier than any starship. The Reza, her voice a low hum of clicks translated by his badge, provided the cryptic instructions. You must take the key to the echo chamber. It is a moon, barren and silent, orbiting our home world. There the veil between realities is thinnest. There the echoes of the chord are most profound. And there the key will reveal its purpose, guided by your touch. Thorne nodded, the surreal nature of the task almost overwhelming. A barren moon, a thinned veil, an ancient artifact that responded to him. It was all so far removed from the logical world he inhabited. Yet the alternative, allowing the Oblivion Chord to sweep across the galaxy, extinguishing life, was unthinkable. He contacted the Odyssey, giving concise, almost terse orders to prepare a shuttle. Dr. Petrova, sensing the shift in Thorne's demeanor, approached him with a look of concern, but he merely shook his head, offering no explanation beyond operational necessity. The Xylosians, upon hearing Lyra's decree, moved with a silent, almost reverent efficiency, preparing a small, armored shuttle for Thorne's journey. Their anticipation, mingled with a pervasive undercurrent of dread, was palpable. The flight to the echo chamber, the desolate moon, was short, but felt interminable. The shuttle's small viewport offered a stark panorama of Xylos Prime, a swirling tapestry of alien clouds and glowing cities, slowly shrinking behind them. Ahead the moon hung, a silent gray sphere pockmarked with craters, its surface devoid of any discernible life. It was a tomb-like place, radiating a profound emptiness that seemed to swallow sound. As the shuttle descended, the automated sensors painted a picture of extreme desolation. No atmosphere, no magnetic field, just rock and the hard vacuum of space. The landing was soft, almost imperceptible. Thorn, clad in a pressurized environment suit, stepped out onto the regolith, the ancient Zelosian artifact still clutched in his gloved hand. The moonscape was eerily beautiful in its starkness, bathed in the faint alien starlight of a distant sun. A profound silence enveloped him, a quiet so absolute it pressed against his eardrums, a silence that felt heavy, pregnant with untold secrets. He was utterly alone, save for the hum of his suit's life support and the faint, rhythmic pulse of the key in his hand. Following Lyra's instructions, Thorn walked towards the largest, deepest crater, a vast circular depression that dominated the lunar surface. It felt like a wound in the moon's skin, an ancient scar. He descended into its depths, the shadows long and alien, the silence intensifying with every step. At the very bottom of the crater, amidst jagged, eroded rock formations, he found a small, perfectly smooth platform of what appeared to be obsidian. It radiated a cold, faint energy. This was the spot. This was the echo chamber. He placed the artifact, the key, onto the obsidian platform. It settled with a soft, almost imperceptible click, and its inner luminescence brightened, casting an ethereal glow over the dark stone. The faint hum that had resonated within the artifact now seemed to expand, filling the entire crater with a low, vibrating thrum that Thorn felt more than heard. It was not a sound in the conventional sense, but a resonance, a deep, pervasive frequency that seemed to vibrate within the very bones of the moon. Thorn, following the last of Lyra's instructions, placed both hands firmly on the glowing artifact. The moment his gloved hands made contact, the subtle hum intensified dramatically, surging through his suit, through his skin, into his very being. It was no longer just a vibration. It was a profound, multi-sensory experience. A blinding flash of light erupted from the key, so intense it pierced the darkened visor of his helmet, overwhelming his vision. He staggered back, but his hands remained inexplicably locked to the artifact. Then the light faded, not into darkness, but into something far more profound, a deluge of information, a torrent of images, sounds, and emotions that flooded his mind, bypassing his conscious thought and pouring directly into his subconscious. It was not a language nor a data stream, but a raw, unadulterated experience of the universe. He was no longer standing on the desolate moon. He was everywhere and nowhere. He saw galaxies vast and swirling, teeming with life, then suddenly, terrifyingly, going dark. He experienced the great silence not as a historical event, but as a living, expanding entity. It wasn't an explosion or a cosmic collision. It was a sound, a single agonizingly dissonant frequency, a cosmic note of disharmony, a resonant vibration that caused the very fabric of existence to unravel. He saw worlds, vibrant and alive, simply cease. Life forms, whether biological or energy-based, would simply unmake themselves, their essence dissolving, their consciousness flickering out like candles in a gale as this frequency washed over them. It was the oblivion chord, and it was truly terrifying. A pervasive hum of anti-existence, the ultimate destroyer of harmony. It didn't consume, it simply erased. The vision continued, rapid and overwhelming. He saw the Zelosians, ancient and terrified, cowering in shielded pockets of space, their advanced technology powerless against the chord's insidious resonance. He felt their despair, their desperate attempts to find a counter-frequency, a note of harmony to disrupt the disharmony. He saw them forge the key, imbuing it with the last faint hopes of their dying star systems. But the key remained dormant, a potential answer without a trigger. Then the vision shifted, narrowed, and focused. He saw images of developing civilizations, fledgling species across the galaxy, rising and falling. And then he saw Earth. He saw his own species, humanity, not as a unified galactic empire, but as a nascent, chaotic, vibrant world. And he saw something else, something that sent a jolt of profound shock through him. Humanity, even in its earliest, most primitive forms, was subconsciously, inherently emitting a counter-frequency. It wasn't a deliberate act, not a technological marvel, but an innate resonance, a subtle, natural resistance. It was a chaotic, beautiful melody of resilience, adaptability, and boundless, sometimes illogical, innovation. This human frequency, though weak on its own, acted as a natural disruptor to the oblivion chord. It wasn't enough to stop the chord entirely, but it had allowed humanity, unknowingly, to survive previous localized manifestations of the chord, to persist where other civilizations had simply vanished. He saw flashes of history. He knew dark ages, plagues, wars, and then the chord's influence, subtly diverted, lessened, or outright nullified, allowing humanity to persist, to rebuild, to grow. The key, Lyraza as ancient artifact, wasn't looking for a powerful weapon or a mystical leader. It was looking for this specific innate human resonance, this peculiar counter-frequency that his species, and he, as a representative of it, uniquely possessed. His touch had resonated with the key because his very being, his very humanity, carried the subtle, chaotic melody that was the antithesis of the oblivion chord's silence. The flood of information receded, the images fading, the overwhelming, sensations settling back into a profound silence. Thorn gasped, tearing his hands away from the artifact. He stumbled back, collapsing onto the cold regolith of the crater floor, his suit heavy around him, his mind reeling. The key continued to glow, steadily now, its internal light brighter, its hum more pronounced, a vibrant, hopeful thrum against the moon's emptiness. He looked down at his gloved hands, then up at the silent and different stars. The truth was not about him as an individual. It was about humanity, their unique biological makeup, their complex neurological architecture, their unpredictable nature, their sheer, stubborn will to live and create all of it, contributed to this intrinsic, counter-resonant frequency. Lyraza hadn't knelt before Aris Thorn, the captain. She had knelt before the unconscious, inherent power of humanity, a power she had instinctively recognized but could only interpret through the lens of her ancient prophecies. The speaker of the void wasn't a singular hero. It was the collective anthem of a species that unknowingly carried the potential to disrupt cosmic silence. The moon was no longer just an echo chamber. It was a crucible where the terrifying truth had been unveiled, and a staggering, cosmic responsibility now settled upon humanity's unsuspecting shoulders. Captain Aris Thorn lay sprawled on the cold regolith of the echo chamber, his suit's life support whirring softly, a stark contrast to the tumultuous storm that raged within his mind. He gasped for air, though the suit provided it steadily, and stared up at the indifferent alien stars, his gloved hands trembling. The ancient Xylosian artifact, the key, pulsed steadily on the obsidian platform before him, its inner luminescence. Now a constant, vibrant glow, its deep hum a palpable vibration against the very moon itself. The overwhelming flood of information, the sudden, terrifying understanding of the oblivion chord, a cosmic frequency of anti-existence, and the shocking revelation of humanity's innate, subconscious counter-frequency had left him shaken. To his core, it wasn't about him, Ares Thorn, the individual. It was about them, about humanity. Their chaotic resilience, their boundless innovation, their sheer, stubborn will to live and create. It was all a part of a naturally occurring, life-affirming resonance, an anthem against the cosmic silence. This was the speaker, not a singular prophet, but a collective melody, an accidental cosmic power. Lyraza hadn't knelt to him as a messiah. She had intuitively recognized this powerful, inherent frequency within him, a resonance she could only interpret through the lens of her ancient, fear-laden prophecies. The weight of this revelation was crushing, immense, a shared burden that settled on his shoulders with the force of a collapsing star. He pushed himself up, his muscles protesting, and retrieved the key. It felt different now, lighter, almost buoyant, its warmth a living presence in his hands. It was no longer an inert mystery, but an activated instrument, humming with a purpose that dwarfed anything he had ever known. He staggered back to the waiting shuttle, his mind racing, trying to process the sheer magnitude of what he had witnessed, of what he now understood. The return flight to Xylos Prime was a blur. He sat silently, the key glowing softly beside him, its low thrum a constant reminder of the truth. As the shuttle docked with the Odyssey, the anticipation on the bridge was palpable. Dr. Petrova, along with the rest of the command crew, looked at him with a mixture of concern and unspoken questions. He simply nodded, a grim set to his jaw, and bypassed their queries, heading directly for the Xylosian docking bay where Lyraza and her retinue waited, their collective gaze fixed on the shuttle's ramp. Lyraza's multifaceted eyes instantly locked onto the key in Thorn's hand, widening almost imperceptibly as she perceived its steady, vibrant glow. A collective, low murmur rippled through the Xylosian delegation, a sound of awe and profound, desperate hope. Thorn felt the familiar wave of deference wash over them, but this time it felt different to him. It was no longer a bewildering mystery, but a tangible expression of their ancient, terrifying fear, and their desperate clinging to a prophecy they believed he fulfilled. He strode forward, the key held prominently, and approached Lyraza. Her face, in its alien way, was a mask of intense anticipation. He didn't offer a formal greeting. There was no time for pleasantries, no space for polite diplomacy. The oblivion chord was coming, its distant rumble growing louder. Queen Lyraza, Thorn began, his voice firm, projecting through his cum-badge's translator, cutting through the heavy silence of the docking bay. The key, it is active, and I understand. Not all of it, perhaps, but enough of the truth. Lyraza. Posture stiffened, her multiple eyes focusing even more intently on him, her anticipation almost painful to witness. The speaker has awakened it, she confirmed, her voice a series of rapid, excited clicks that underscored her belief. The prophecy is fulfilled. Thorn shook his head slowly, his gaze unwavering. Not exactly, Leraza. Not in the way you believe. The prophecy is a misunderstanding, a beautiful, tragic misinterpretation of something far grander. I am not the speaker. My species, humanity. We are the speaker, or rather the anthem. He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in, watching the ripple of confusion and dawning realization pass through Leraza and her retinue. He explained in simple, clear terms what he had witnessed on the echo chamber moon. He spoke of the oblivion chord as a disharmonious cosmic frequency, a note of unmaking. And then he spoke of humanity's unique, accidental, innate counter-frequency, the chaotic, resilient, life-affirming melody that every human being unconsciously broadcast. We are not special because of some grand design, Leraza, Thorn explained, his voice gaining conviction. We are special because our very existence, our stubborn ability to adapt, to innovate, to thrive amidst chaos, creates a resonance that disrupts the chord. It's an inherent biological and neurological property, a natural defense. The key didn't activate because I am some chosen one. It activated because it resonated with the human frequency within me. It sought a counter-frequency, and it found it in humanity. A profound silence descended upon the Xylosian delegation, far deeper than the initial shock of Leraza's kneeling. Their mandibles stilled. Their iridescent forms seemed to dim slightly. The very foundation of their ancient prophecy, a prophecy they had clung to through millennia of fear, was being reinterpreted, flipped on its head. Leraza herself seemed to freeze, processing his words, her multifaceted eyes flickering with an intense internal struggle between millennia of belief and the overwhelming, undeniable truth Thorn presented. After a long, agonizing moment, a low, drawn-out click escaped her, a sound Thorn now recognized as a deep exhalation of wonder and profound understanding. The collective, she hummed, her voice imbued with a new kind of awe, not the individual. A species as an instrument. Her head tilted, a gesture Thorn now understood as thoughtful contemplation. Our ancestors, they sought a single beacon. But you are a symphony, a discordant, beautiful symphony. A flicker of something akin to a smile, an alien shift of her sensory organs, crossed her face. The reverence in her gaze didn't diminish but transformed, shifting from awe of a prophesied individual to a profound, almost humble respect for an entire species. The kneeling, Leraza now understood, was an unconscious acknowledgment of the profound, accidental cosmic power that humanity possessed. The shared burden, Thorn explained, was now truly shared. The key was an amplifier. It could take humanity's innate counter-frequency and broadcast it across vast interstellar distances, creating a protective bubble, a zone of disharmony that would disrupt the oblivion chord's destructive wave. But it required more than just his touch. It required a deep understanding of humanity's unique biological and psychological processes, an understanding that only human scientists could truly achieve. It required collaboration. The Xylosians, Leraza, quickly grasped, had the ancient knowledge of the chord, the technology to amplify and project, and the desperation. Humanity had the unique, inherent counter-frequency. The alliance that followed was unprecedented. Dr. Petrova, initially bewildered by Thorn's cryptic urgency, quickly absorbed the reality of the situation, her scientific mind alight with the sheer, terrifying brilliance of the concept. A biological counter-frequency, she murmured, her eyes wide. That explains so much of humanity's improbable survival through past galactic events. She and her team, working tirelessly with Xylosian engineers and mystics, began to deconstruct the key, not to destroy it, but to understand its unique properties and how it could interface with human physiology and collective consciousness on a massive scale. Days turned into weeks of intense, high-stakes collaboration. The Odyssey became a hub of interspecies cooperation, a desperate race against an unseen cosmic clock. The Xylosian astronomical observatories, now linked with human sensor networks, confirmed Lyraza's darkest fears. The faint, insidious rumble of the Oblivion Cord was growing stronger, its approach accelerating. It was still light years away, but its devastating resonance was beginning to subtly affect deep space communications, causing faint, inexplicable static, a low hum of cosmic dread. The pressure was immense. Thorn worked alongside Lyraza, bridging the gap between scientific pragmatism and ancient mysticism. They decided on a radical plan. Using the key as a template, the Xylosians would construct a network of anthem generators across their star systems, drawing power from their advanced energy grids and using human volunteers to act as temporary conduits, focusing their unique resonance through the amplified structures. It was a risky, terrifying endeavor, pushing both species to their absolute limits. The first anthem generator, a smaller prototype based on the key's core principles, was constructed on Zelos Prime, a massive, crystalline spire that pulsed with a faint, hopeful blue light. Thorn, alongside a team of human volunteers and Xylosian engineers, supervised its activation. The moment the human participants focused their collective intention, projecting their chaotic, resilient frequency, the spire hung to life, emitting a soft, resonant wave that seemed to push back against the subtle, growing dread in the air. It was a faint push, a whisper, against a coming roar, but it was a beginning. Lyraza, standing beside Thorn, placed a multi-jointed hand on his arm, a gesture of profound gratitude that transcended species. "The harmony returns," she clicked, her voice filled with a fragile hope. The future remained uncertain, fraught with unimaginable peril. The Oblivion Cord was still coming, its devastating wave slowly but inexorably approaching. Humanity, now recognized as the galactic anthem, faced a monumental task: to rapidly expand the network of anthem generators, to educate and prepare its own population for this cosmic responsibility, and to convince other fearful, isolated species of the Cord's true nature and humanity's unique role. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless unknown challenges, and their survival depended on an unprecedented act of interspecies unity, driven by humanity's accidental gift. The Odyssey, no longer just a research vessel, became the vanguard of a new galactic initiative, a beacon of hope against a looming existential threat. Thorn, once a skeptical astrophysicist, now stood at the precipice of a galactic conflict, not as a warrior, but as a conductor, guiding a cosmic symphony whose melody was the very essence of human life, an unexpected anthem against the deep. terrifying silence of the void. The first note had been played, and the survival of countless worlds now hinged on humanity's ability to sing their chaotic, resilient song across the stars.